Hi, welcome to Engage New York, Module 4, Lesson 22. This lesson continues with the fifth grade priority standard of scaling and comparing the size of the product to the size of the factors. That is what our big idea for the lesson is going to be. But before we get started, well, why don't we read the objective together? I can compare the size of the product to the size of the factors. So, looking at going back to our previous lesson, when we think back, when you're multiplying by 1, what happens to your number? So, your product, if you're multiplying by 1, like 2/3 times 2/2, well, that's really 1, right? So the product, so if I'm comparing the size of the product to the size of the factors, my I'm really multiplying by 1. So I really am still getting 2/3, right? Even though over it's 4/6, well, 4/6 reduces down to 2/3. So it's just renaming that fraction, right? Or creating an equivalent fraction. So we're going to continue with this idea, but we're going to be multiplying by factors that are less than 1. And what does that do to our product? And factors that are greater than 1. And what does that do to our product? So with that as our introduction, let's go ahead and complete a little bit of fluency. And this first fluency reviews lesson 20. So going back and converting or renaming a gallon into quarts, renaming yards into feet, feet to yards, pints to cups, cups to pints. Now remember the strategy that we used each time, we were going to line up there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon, right? And there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So naming or writing down what we know and then figuring out the direction. So are we going from smaller units to bigger units? Remember, then you use a fraction. If you're going from greater unit to smaller unit, you're using the whole number. So always start there. Write down what you know and then attempt the problem. So you're renaming a gallon into quarts, yards into feet. Go ahead and complete 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. Come back and check your answer. All right. Yes, there's a lot of work that goes into those problems. All right. So remember, I started off by renaming or figuring out what direction I was going, right? Writing out the equivalencies. So 3 1/4 is equal to 3 1/4 times 1 gallon. Right here, I'm going to go down and rename my measurement. So 3 1/4 times 4 quarts. I have to change this to an improper fraction. 13/4 times 4 quarts. You end up with 13 quarts because the 4's cancel. Then here I have 2 2/3 yard is equal to 8 feet. I did the same thing here. This one right here, I went from smaller units to greater units, so I had to I did my little division and created 1/3 of a yard. So I came down here, 2 5/6 times 1 foot, and then I replaced or renamed my 1 foot as yards because that's what my answer needs to be in yards, right? This comes down to 17/18 of a yard, which makes sense because there's 3 feet in a yard, and this isn't quite 3 feet, so it's not quite 1 yard, right? So always analyzing, going back to see if your answer makes sense. 5 1/2 pints is equal to 5 1/2 pints times 1, 5 1/2 times 1 pint. I rename it into cups, end up with 11 cups. Then here I have 2 cups is equal to 1 pint. Now I'm going smaller to larger, right? So I have to create that fraction. So 1/2 of a cup is equal to 1/2 times 1 cup. And now I'm going to rename my fraction. I have 1/2 times 1/2 pint is equal to 1/4 of a pint. All right, how did you do? Is it getting easier? Are you getting better, stronger, faster? All right, this next fluency activity reviews lesson 21. Go ahead and begin and come back to check your answer. All right, how'd you do? 5, 4, 2, 8, 4, 3, 3, 10. Notice I used cross canceling in order to make the multiplication easier. Don't have to, but it absolutely makes your life so much easier when you do it. All right. Our next part of our fluency is group counting by multiples of 100. So you are going to group count. So count by 10, count by 100s. Count by 10s to 100. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, right? Okay, so this little activity is actually getting you ready for lesson 22. So now I want you to group count by 5s, group count by 2s, group count by 4s, group count by 25, all the way to 100 each time, group count to 50 to 100. All right, go ahead and do that, write it out, and then come back to check your work. Okay, so I stopped on a couple of these. So my question for you is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. How many 10s are in 100? How many groups of 10 are in 100? Well, there are 10. So it's 10 times 10 equals 100, right? All right. Let's jump to, let's go to 5s. How many 5s are in 100? What do you have to multiply 5 by in order to get to 100? 20, right? So you should have 20 numbers right there. How many times, what do you have to multiply 2 by to get to 100? 50, right? To get to 100. So you should have 50 numbers. I only got halfway. And then how many times, what do you have to multiply 4 by to get to 100? Well, 25, right? So you're going to have 25 numbers. And then what do you multiply 25 by to get to 100? 4, right? And what do you multiply 50 by to get to 100? All right. That's just prepping you for the ideas that we're going to take on in lesson 22. All right. We have an application problem here. So let's look at it here. To test her math skills, Isabella father told her he would give her 6/8 of $1 if she could tell him how much money is, let's change that, it is as well as the money, like the actual dollar amount, money amount in decimal form. What should Isabella tell her father? Okay, so let's read it again. To test her math skills, Isabella's father told her he would give her 6/8 of a dollar if she could tell him how much money it is, as well as the money amount in decimal form. What should Isabella tell her father? All right, this is an application problem. This is reviewing lesson 21. This is reviewing our last lesson. So go ahead and try this out, and actually try it. Try something and come back to check your work. All right. So I took the fraction 6/8 and I simplified it and I got 3/4. 3/4 of a dollar. So 6/8 is equal to 3/4 of a dollar. Well, I know. So 3/4 times, because now I want to try to create a decimal, right? So 3/4 times 25 over 25 is 75 over 100, which is 75 cents. So that's not the answer. This is the answer. She should tell him that 6/8 of a dollar is the same as 3/4 of a dollar, which is 75 cents. How did you do? Did you know how to attack that problem? Did you know what step 1 was? Then, taking your step 1, after you solve for your step 1, did you know where to go for step 2? That's the big idea on that application problem. All right, so remember, this is a review of our last lesson. So go back and study this problem to make sure that you know how to solve that problem. Okay, that will do it. This will do it for our fluency for lesson 22. Meet me back here for concept development.